Putin runs Russia like the godfather of a crime family, littering the landscape with violent deaths, mystery illnesses, and dubious suicides.
Russia is playing dirty. Putin knows he's losing. A war he once arrogantly promised would be over in a week is now closing in on its 4th year. That's exactly why he's funneling millions into professional assassins to take down Ukraine's best, especially its senior officials. On the morning of July 10th, a masked assassin approached Colonel Ivan Voronich right outside his building and fired 5 silenced shots at close range, killing the 48-year-old officer instantly. The killer then fled on a bicycle, leaving witnesses in shock. Within hours, the SBU launched a nationwide manhunt. Surveillance footage and intercepted communications led them to 2 foreign suspects, both identified by the SBU as Russian agents. The assassins had precise knowledge of Voronich's home address, his everyday movements, and even the internal architecture of his residence. Such intimate details strongly indicated prior surveillance and infiltration by Russia's FSB, which is why the head of the SBU personally oversaw the special operation to locate the foreign hit squad. The hunt ended 3 days later in a fierce shootout. On July 13th, SBU commandos raided a Kyiv hideout, killing both suspects after they opened fire. The SBU later released footage of 2 bodies liquidated on the floor. But losing Voronich was still a devastating blow for Ukraine. Born in Soviet Ukraine, he grew up in a time when loyalty to Kyiv wasn't even a given. He joined the SBU back in 1997, long before the war seemed like a nightmare. In an obituary piece, his colleague said Voronich was a man who had been fighting the enemy since 2014 and was one of those who pioneered a direction within the service that is now causing many problems for the Russians. Voronich masterminds some of Ukraine's boldest sabotage missions, orchestrating strikes on supply depots, recruiting crucial informants, and most famously, coordinating the audacious 2024 incursion deep into Russia's Kursk region, a raid that set Russia's war effort back by almost a year. It was an embarrassment Moscow won't forget for decades to come. Earlier in the war, when Kyiv was under siege and Ukraine's survival hung by a thread, it was Voronich's team that carefully established underground resistance cells in occupied territories, allowing information to flow back to Ukrainian command even from behind enemy lines. His agents became the eyes and ears of Ukrainian forces, pinpointing key Russian positions and enabling precision strikes that prevented countless Russian casualties. Under his guidance, Ukrainian special forces successfully infiltrated Russian-controlled logistics hubs, setting ablaze ammunition stockpiles that crippled Moscow's advance for weeks. To Russian intelligence, Voronich was simply a threat that needed to be eliminated at any cost. For Putin, spending millions to assassinate the brains of the SBU is now his main strategy. He knows that direct face-to-face combat means sacrificing thousands of troops each day. Troops Russia simply can't afford to lose, especially not after almost 4 exhausting years. But then again, none of this brutality is new. Russia has always waged a dirty shadow war. The Kremlin, and before it, the Soviet KGB, has a long-established policy of using assassinations to silence its enemies, to maintain power, to spread fear beyond its borders. Under Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer who climbed rapidly through the ranks of its successor agency, the FSB, these methods became even more aggressive and even more ruthless. Since Putin came to power in 1999, Russia has seen an alarming number of critics, defectors, and even influential businessmen meet untimely and mysterious ends, often through rare poisons, staged suicides, or ruthless executions in broad daylight. One of the most notorious assassinations ordered under Putin's regime was that of Alexander Litvinenko, a former FSB officer turned outspoken critic of the Kremlin. Litvinenko fled Russia in 2000 and sought asylum in Britain, becoming one of Putin's most vocal opponents abroad. His detailed accusations against the Kremlin, especially regarding corruption, organized crime links, and the FSB's secret poison laboratories, inherited from the Soviet KGB, made him a prime target. In November of 2006, someone slipped polonium-210, a rare and highly radioactive isotope, into Litvinenko's tea at a London hotel. Litvinenko died a slow, painful death over 3 weeks, as his organs melted from within. A subsequent British inquiry pinpointed 2 Russian agents as directly responsible, concluding that their actions were probably approved by President Putin himself. Litvinenko had previously warned about poison laboratories inherited by the FSB from the KGB era, cautioning the world that such toxins would eventually be unleashed upon Russia's enemies. Tragically, he himself became the most prominent victim of his own dire warnings. This assassination shocked the world, not only for its gruesome nature, but also because it demonstrated the Kremlin's willingness to deploy nuclear substances on foreign soil to intimidate enemies of the state. Yet, Litvinenko was far from the last target. In 2018, the world was again jolted awake when Sergei Skripal, a former Russian double agent, and his daughter Yulia were poisoned in Salisbury, England, by the nerve agent Novichok. Novichok is a class of Soviet-era chemical weapon specifically designed to evade international chemical weapon detection. It attacks the central nervous system with brutal efficiency. Skripal and his daughter barely survived after weeks in critical condition, but the attack triggered an unprecedented international backlash against Moscow. This time again, British authorities identified 2 Russian military intelligence GRU operatives as the perpetrators. Soon, 23 other Russian diplomats identified as undeclared intelligence officers were expelled, and more than 20 allied nations, including the United States, Germany, France, and Canada, quickly followed suit, collectively expelling over 150 Russian diplomats, marking the largest coordinated diplomatic expulsion since the darkest days of the Cold War. Yet, Putin's use of chemical weapons did not stop there. In 2020, Alexei Navalny, Russia's most influential opposition leader and a fearless anti-corruption activist, was poisoned with Novichok while on a flight from Tomsk to Moscow. Only rapid medical intervention and evacuation to Germany saved his life, where a meticulous investigation by Bellingcat and several other news outlets revealed an assassination team of 8 FSB operatives behind the attempt. Shockingly, Navalny even managed to trick one of his would-be assassins into confessing over the phone, exposing the depth of state-sponsored terror. Ultimately, Navalny's brave decision to return to Russia led to his arrest and imprisonment. In 2024, after years of deliberate neglect, harsh isolation, and abuse in a brutal Arctic penal colony, Navalny died behind bars under mysterious circumstances. Journalists, too, have frequently found themselves targeted by the Kremlin's shadow assassins. Anna Politkovskaya, a fearless investigative journalist who had meticulously documented Russian atrocities and human rights abuses in Chechnya, was shot dead at point-blank range in the elevator of her Moscow apartment building on October 7, 2006. Coincidentally, Putin's birthday. Her reporting had embarrassed Russian authorities deeply and threatened to expose high-level corruption. While hired gunmen were eventually arrested and convicted, the masterminds behind the assassination have never been fully identified, leaving an open wound in Russia's conscience and sending a chilling message to the nation's media. The cost of exposing Putin's crimes can be deadly. With every passing year, the assassinations only reinforce the perception that disloyalty or even inconvenient truth in Putin's Russia could quickly become a death sentence. And behind nearly all of these dark operations stood one organization, operating in the shadows, the Federal Security Services, better known as the FSB. Officially established on April 12, 1995, the FSB inherited the ruthless traditions of the Soviet-era KGB, eventually becoming Putin's most feared and effective instrument for silencing opposition. When the Soviet era collapsed in 1991, the once mighty KGB, feared globally for espionage, assassinations, and ruthless suppression of dissent, was dismantled into several smaller agencies. Russia briefly experimented with a successor organization known as the Federal Counterintelligence Service, or FSK. However, by 1995, President Boris Yeltsin realized the agency needed restructuring to consolidate power and regain control over internal security. Thus, on April 12, 1995, the FSK evolved into what we now know as the Federal Security Services, or the FSB, inheriting not only the KGB's infrastructure, but also thousands of experienced operatives who had been trained extensively in Soviet-era espionage tactics, surveillance tactics, and psychological warfare. Unlike Western intelligence and security agencies, which typically focuses their efforts on external threats, counterterrorism, organized crime, and cybersecurity, the FSB was primarily dedicated to ensuring domestic political control and maintaining regime stability. Its mandate quickly expanded beyond traditional security operations, embedding itself deeply into Russia's political bloodstream. Under Vladimir Putin, a former KGB operative himself, loyalty became non-negotiable. The FSB rapidly transformed into Putin's personal tool, ruthlessly enforcing political conformity and neutralizing opponents through surveillance, blackmail, intimidation, and targeted killings. Putin's rise to power further transformed the FSB. With his arrival at the presidency in 1999, the agency took on even greater authority, its influence penetrating nearly every aspect of Russian society, from politics and business to media and the judiciary. Loyalty to Putin's regime became the highest virtue, while any sign of dissent became synonymous with betrayal. Putin's opponents were surveyed 24/7 and constantly harassed, arrested, and some even mysteriously disappeared. And ever since Russia started losing this war against Ukraine in 2022, the FSB's core mission has expanded beyond Russia's borders. Its goal is now being nothing short of crippling Ukraine from the inside out, and the only way they know how to do this is via assassinations and sabotage campaigns. As early as 2023, Ukrainian authorities started noticing a surge in random acts of terror, surges and attacks far behind the front line, arson incidents targeting military recruitment offices, sabotage at critical infrastructure sites, and even small-scale bombings at post offices and public facilities. At first, these attacks seemed random, but a deeper investigation by the SBU soon revealed that Russian intelligence operatives were recruiting locals through anonymous Telegram channels. These channels promised quick cash payments to young and desperate Ukrainians willing to carry out seemingly minor crimes. But often, the task turned out to be far deadlier than advertised. Take, for instance, the case of a 19-year-old named Oleg. Responding to an online job ad promising $1,000 for simply spraying graffiti on a police station wall, Oleg agreed without hesitation, desperate for money amid Ukraine's struggling wartime economy. Yet when he opened the suspicious bag he was instructed to carry, he found not spray paint, but a crude homemade bomb packed with nails and bolts, enough to cause mass casualties. Realizing he'd been deceived into a terror plot, Oleg alerted the authorities, just in time. Similar cases have been showing up across multiple cities. According to the SBU, these smaller, seemingly random acts of sabotage serve a critical strategic purpose. They drain the attention and the resources of Ukrainian security forces, creating vulnerabilities that allow larger, high-profile FSB operations to be executed more easily elsewhere. You see, the Russian handlers initially demanded relatively minor crimes from recruits, such as arson or vandalism, and gradually increased their demands. If the recruited individual hesitated, handlers quickly abandoned promises of payment and resorted instead to blackmail, often leveraging hacked personal photos, private communications, or sensitive personal information. Additionally, handlers would instruct recruits to record videos of themselves carrying out these acts. These videos would then be strategically shared across pro-Russian social media platforms, amplifying the false narrative that ordinary Ukrainians were growing desperate, disillusioned, and actively rebelling against their own government. This carefully orchestrated propaganda was intended to manipulate public perception, brainwashing vulnerable audiences by feeding them convincing yet entirely fabricated narratives. According to an SBU spokesperson, Ukrainian authorities detained over 700 individuals in 2024 alone for acts of sabotage, terrorism, or collaboration with enemy intelligence. Disturbingly, many of them were teenagers, exploited for their naivety and economic vulnerability. The youngest identified by Ukrainian security services was an 11-year-old girl from Odessa, manipulated by Russian handlers into committing acts far beyond her understanding. While these smaller, scattered acts of sabotage and disruption continued to occupy Ukraine's attention, the FSB was orchestrating something far more audacious. In May of 2024, Russian intelligence operatives managed to infiltrate the inner circle of President Volodymyr Zelensky by recruiting a high-ranking Ukrainian colonel directly from his personal bodyguard detail. He was instructed to identify someone within Zelensky's trusted entourage who could be persuaded or coerced into kidnapping or assassinating the Ukrainian leader. This dangerous conspiracy was designed to inflict maximum damage, aiming not only at Zelensky himself, but also at Ukraine's top security officials. Conspirators meticulously prepared simultaneous attacks, planning to use drones packed with explosives and precision-guided missiles to strike the homes of Zelensky's top intelligence officials, the head of Ukraine's military intelligence and the chief of the SBU. Stockpiles of explosives, drones, and weaponry were strategically hidden throughout Kyiv, ready to be activated at a moment's notice. This attack was intended as a gift, timed perfectly for Vladimir Putin's inauguration. But eventually, Ukrainian counterintelligence agents uncovered the conspiracy just weeks before it could be carried out. The FSB, despite its deep resources and relentless tactics, faced an opponent more capable and more determined than perhaps it had anticipated. The Security Service of Ukraine, better known as the SBU. Formed by the remnants of the Soviet-era KGB Ukrainian branch in 1991, the SBU evolved rapidly over the decades, shifting its focus from the heavy-handed Soviet-style control to a modern intelligence agency, excelling in counter-espionage, cyber operations, and targeted counterterrorism. By the time Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the SBU had already transformed into a highly professional service, battle-hardened from years of confronting Russian aggression in Crimea and Donbass. Unlike the FSB, which served only Putin and other oligarchs, the SBU operated with the clear and singular mission of protecting Ukrainian sovereignty and statehood. Its officers are deeply patriotic, motivated not by fear or political reward, but by the existential threat Ukraine faced. When Russia's shadow war and assassinations escalated following the full-scale invasion, the SBU turned to sophisticated intelligence-gathering techniques and recruiting networks of informants deep inside of Russian-occupied territories. Their ability to disrupt Russian sabotage, assassination plots, and espionage activities became legendary within intelligence circles. The agency also collaborated extensively with NATO advisors, the CIA, and MI6, refining and enhancing their already formidable techniques and operational capabilities. This close partnership allowed the SBU to access advanced intelligence tools, modern training methods, and critical strategic insights. Just a few months ago, the SBU announced it had disrupted 2 distinct assassination attempts targeting the prominent journalist and commentator, Dmytro Gordon. One of these plots was orchestrated by a network led by a former pro-Russian Ukrainian MP. This group planned to either plant explosives near Gordon's car or launch a missile strike directly at his residence. Simultaneously, another assassination group had been promised a hefty sum of $400,000 by the Russian handlers to execute Gordon through gunfire. Fortunately, Ukrainian security forces managed to dismantle these networks just in time. But the fact remains, Russia isn't just targeting soldiers, intelligence officers, or political figures. They're going after anyone who displeases Putin, no matter how civilian or seemingly harmless their role might be. Disturbingly, the frequency and intensity of such assassination attempts are steadily increasing. Just this August, a serving member of Ukraine's parliament and former speaker was brutally murdered outside of his home. He was one of the leaders of the pro-European demonstrations in 2013 and 2014 that toppled Ukraine's pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych, which Russia used as a pretext to seize the Crimean Peninsula and set in motion the initially covert and now all-out invasions of Ukraine. A nationalist and outspoken critic of Moscow, he was on Russia's radar for years. So, on the 30th of August, a man disguised as a courier approached him in front of his home in Lviv. He handed him a package and then pulled out a gun, firing multiple times. He collapsed and died almost immediately. Although the attacker fled, Ukrainian law enforcement managed to apprehend him shortly after. You may be shocked to know why the assassin did it. According to law enforcement agencies, the suspected killer was a grieving father. His Russian handlers promised him assistance in recovering the remains of his son, who went missing while fighting Russians in eastern Ukraine. Goes to show how the FSB cynically exploits not only the desperation and poverty of recruits, but also their deepest grief and personal tragedies. People flooded social media, not merely to express grief and outrage, but also to demand a swift and decisive action from the SBU. Yet to be fair, the SBU has already played a crucial role in Ukraine's extraordinary resilience. It's one of the main reasons the country has been able to hold out against Russia's relentless aggression for so long. And since Russia has already waged a shadow war inside of Ukraine, the SBU and Ukrainian military intelligence have certainly responded in kind. Since the full-scale invasion began in 2022, there have been over 150 recorded assassination attempts or successful targeted killings involving both countries. Just like their Russian counterparts, Ukrainian agents have also carried out drone strikes, sabotage missions, and deep incursions into enemy territory. But they've done so with significantly greater precision, impact, and effectiveness. Unlike Russia's often chaotic and hastily organized efforts, Ukrainian intelligence operations are meticulously planned, targeted, and frequently successful, consistently delivering substantial blows to Russia's war machine. For instance, the August 2022 car bombing in Moscow that killed Daria Dugina, a prominent nationalist commentator and daughter of Alexander Dugin, a key ideological architect of Russia's imperial ambitions. Dugina herself was a vocal supporter of the invasion, actively promoting the war effort and spreading pro-Kremlin propaganda across Russian media. Her sudden death sent shockwaves through Russia's elite, demonstrating Ukraine's growing capability and willingness to strike deep into Russian territory and target influential civilian propagandists directly linked to the Kremlin's war effort. After this assassination, Ukrainian intelligence temporarily paused its covert strikes inside of Russia, likely cautious about triggering backlash from Western allies, who expressed concern over escalation. But after a series of high-profile assassination attempts by Russia, including the targeted killing of a respected Ukrainian military strategist in January of 2023, Ukraine's hesitation quickly evaporated. Ukrainian operations resumed aggressively, though now with a strategic shift away from media personalities towards more direct military and intelligence targets. High-ranking Russian officers, commanders of specialized units, military hardware, and critical logistics infrastructure quickly found themselves in Ukraine's crosshairs. In May of 2023, Ukrainian drones successfully hit a major fuel storage depot in Bryansk, close to the Ukrainian border, destroying more than 40,000 tons of fuel that were intended to supply Russian armored units deployed around Kharkiv and Donetsk. The operation sent smoke visible from miles away, severely disrupting Russian logistics and temporarily paralyzing tank and armored vehicle operations in critical frontline areas. Just 2 months later, in July of 2023, Ukrainian drones penetrated deep into Russian territory and carried out a precise strike targeting a military railway junction near Belgorod. The depot's destruction set off massive secondary explosions, obliterating thousands of stored artillery shells and several ammunition-laden trains, dramatically slowing Russia's offensive capability in the Kharkiv region for weeks. By 2024, Ukraine had carried out dozens of similar attacks deep within Russian territory, each one bolder and far more destructive than the last. The sheer frequency and destructive impact of these operations forced Russia's intelligence services, including the FSB, to redirect their focus and resources towards defending strategic assets within their own borders, rather than pursuing aggressive covert operations against Ukraine. Soon enough, Ukraine escalated even further, launching a series of high-profile targeted assassinations. For example, on December 17, 2024, in the capital city of Moscow, an electric scooter parked near a cafe exploded, killing Lieutenant General Igor Krylenov and his adjutant. Krylenov headed Russia's Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Forces, a specialized branch within the Russian military responsible for preparing and protecting troops against weapons of mass destruction. Under his leadership, the unit managed strategic stockpiles, trained personnel for chemical warfare scenarios, and oversaw laboratories capable of handling hazardous materials. According to credible intelligence reports and Ukrainian allegations, Krylenov personally supervised the covert use of chemical agents, including riot control gases mixed with toxic additives, during frontline engagements. These substances were explicitly banned for battlefield use under the Chemical Weapons Convention, to which Russia is officially a signatory. Independent investigations by Ukrainian intelligence and international monitoring groups documented multiple instances where Ukrainian soldiers reported severe respiratory symptoms, blindness, and debilitating injuries consistent with chemical exposure, particularly near contested areas in the Donbas and Zaporizhzhia regions. Samples collected from battlefields reportedly contained chemical irritants combined with nerve agents designed to incapacitate and demoralize Ukrainian defenders. Just a week earlier, engineer Mikhail Shatsky, responsible for developing advanced guidance and targeting systems for Russia's combat drones and precision-guided missiles, was shot dead in St. Petersburg. Shatsky's expertise had significantly improved the accuracy and reliability of Russia's Shahed-type kamikaze drones, frequently used against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. In April of 2025, a carefully placed car bomb eliminated a senior defense engineer, publicly known only by the alias of Anton Zemin, who specialized in hypersonic missile propulsion technologies, critical to the development of Russia's next-generation Kinzhal missiles. Even Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik, deputy head of operations in Russia's general staff, was assassinated by a targeted car bomb in Moscow. And all of these are only a handful among numerous similar operations. But you get the idea. These killings are high risk, high reward. They disrupt Russia's strategic planning and sends a message that nowhere within Russia's borders is genuinely safe. Beyond targeted assassinations, Ukraine has increasingly prioritized drones and missile operations, systematically targeting and striking critical infrastructure deep within Russian territory. For instance, in early March of 2024, Ukrainian drones launched a major strike against the massive Ust-Luga oil export terminal, Russia's largest on the Baltic Sea. The facility, responsible for exporting nearly 2 million barrels of crude oil daily, sustained severe damage, completely stopping oil exports for more than 2 weeks. According to industry estimates, this disruption alone resulted in losses exceeding $1.2 billion. Similarly, in June of 2024, Ukrainian naval drones struck the Primorsk refinery complex. This facility processes up to 300,000 barrels of crude oil per day. The attack severely damaged refining equipment, causing production shutdowns for nearly a month, and it forced Russia to redirect oil exports through less efficient and more vulnerable logistical routes. Energy analysts estimated the cost of this single attack in terms of repairs, lost production, and logistical disruption at approximately $850 million. And perhaps Ukraine's most disruptive operation came in August of 2024, when a coordinated missile and drone strike targeted Russia's Black Sea Fleet headquarters and associated military storage depots in Sevastopol, Crimea. The attack destroyed multiple naval vessels, severely damaged ammunition stockpiles, and incapacitated key command and control infrastructure. Russia lost an estimated $2 billion in military assets overnight, forcing it to significantly scale back naval operations in the Black Sea and cede crucial maritime advantages to Ukraine. Now, Russia finds itself cornered, bleeding billions in a shadow war it once confidently dominated. The dirty operations that were supposed to tilt the scales in Moscow's favor have instead become a massive drain on Putin's already overstretched military resources. Russia's intelligence apparatus is losing operatives, influence, and credibility at an alarming rate. With every Ukrainian counterstrike, Putin's carefully crafted image of power and control weakens even further. Desperate and increasingly isolated, he has begun pushing aggressively for negotiations, even going so far as to openly float invitations to Zelensky and US President Trump to Moscow.